Hey guys, we're at the wine store, and this is a request from one of our subscribers. He asked us to do a video on wines that were less than $10 and still like really good quality.
Yeah, and so I got my start in the beverage business by working at a wine shop and managing one. So I learned early on how to find value wine, and it's pretty easy to pick good wine. And that's what we're going to show you today.
Hey, we're back, and Paul is about to show you guys what he found.
So yeah, we got a bunch of really cool wine. The most expensive one was $10.99, but I figured $10.99 is still kind of like $10, so whatever. But we got some cool varietals, and we're going to talk about some cool wine once we get back up into the apartment. Should be a good time.
All right, see you guys soon.
All right, so here's our first pick. This is a Dantzante Pinot Grigio, and it's a Pinot Grigio from a region, Venezia. So Venezia, it is in northeastern Italy, and Pinot Grigio is usually a great choice because it's very mild. They typically have a bit of a fruitier, bright flavor to them. This one in particular bears this label here. That's what we call the DOCG label, and that means that the Italian government has authoritatively certified that this wine does indeed is made of Pinot Grigio and tastes stylistically appropriate for the region from which it hails from. So you always want to look for the import strap when you're getting an Italian wine or a French wine, because this means that the government of Italy or France, respectively, the straps look very, very similar for each of those countries. That the government has made sure to test this wine and say, hey, this meets all of our standards for wine of this type of this region. So that's usually a good indicator of quality. Other things that we're looking at on this bottle art's pretty good. I usually try not to pay attention to that. That's usually not a very good indicator of the quality of the wine. This here is a screw top bottle of white. So even though it's a little bit older, the vintage is 2017, about 6 years old. So normally you want to drink whites when they're younger. There are some exceptions. The world of wine is absolutely massive. But because this is a screw top as opposed to a cork, that means that there hasn't been any oxygen interface through the cork. So the bottle is effectively not aged. It is essentially as fresh and will drink exactly as the day that it was placed into this sealed bottle. So yeah, Pinot Grigio, really lovely wine. It is extremely versatile. The sommeliers that I've worked with told me that when they were taking their somm test, when you're tasting whites, Pinot Grigio is usually the one that you want to guess last, because it tends to have a much milder flavor than some of the other varietals. Varietals like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay all have like, what do I want to say, really common flavors depending on which regions they're made in. And those flavors are really, really expressive of those varietals. Whereas Pinot Grigio, the flavors that Pinot Grigios have are found in other wines, and they're not overly abundant in a way that I would say like all Pinot Grigios taste like grapefruit. I wouldn't make that kind of a claim, and one shouldn't. There's a huge amount of diversity in wine. I am not a sommelier. I am just a wine enthusiast. But for $10, this is an awesome bottle. The Ecco Domani was another Pinot Grigio from the same region that was around the same price. Why did I not go with that? Because bigger producers tend to make slightly inferior quality wine. In the world of wine, we call it the 7 million case mark. Usually a producer will make excellent wines, but when they get big enough to the point where they have to make about 7 million cases of wine, they usually drop their production standards and move to more rapid aging or change equipment. And basically the winemaking changes as the volume of wine production increases. And more often than not, that change in the production quality results in a lower quality wine. Ecco Domani is a fine wine, but for my 10, I'm going to go with this guy and give it a shot. And I'm certain that it's going to be great. The Italian government saw fit to certify it, so if it's good enough for them, I'm pretty sure it should be good enough for me. So there's our first one. So for our second pick, we've got Upshot by Rodney Strong. Now, Rodney Strong is a fine winemaker and vintner out of California, and he's been in the game for a long time. Very familiar with his products. I've actually drank more Rodney Strong reds than I have whites, but I have a great deal of confidence in this winemaker. And that's one thing that you can do in order to find value. I saw this wine marked down at like $10. And I was like, wow, I know that's going to be good. Rodney Strong knows how to make good wine. And what's cool about this one is a lot of times with old world wines, that is to say wines from Europe, they won't give you a lot of information about how the wine is made. A lot of those wines are from regions where they have an expectation that the wine will taste a certain way. All Côte de Rhônes from France should taste like a Côte de Rhône. What is a Côte de Rhône? Well, Côte de Rhône is a blend of red wine grapes, typically Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvèdre. And the DOCG label, like I mentioned in the last one from France, will take Côte de Rhônes, try them out, make sure that they meet the government standards of the grape varietals and the flavor profile, and then pack it up and seal it, and that's Côte de Rhône. And the winemakers oftentimes won't tell you what the blend is because the blend might change from year to year. One year, the Grenache grapes might be really awesome, so there's more of those in the blend than the next year. So when you come to a blended wine, a lot of times there's not a lot of data available. This bottle of wine, however, puts all that data right up front for super duper wine geeks like me. And you can see how long they fined it, how long they bottled it, when they blended it, how long the barrel aging happened, the fermentation and the harvest here on this calendar. Really cool arrangement of data. That's super duper high level. I honestly don't know enough about winemaking for the blending and fermentation data to really be meaningful to me. What is meaningful to me, however, is this information right over here where it tells us what wines are blended in this bottle. So this is a white blend, right? So we've got a couple of different white wines in it. You'll also notice that there is in this blend a Pinot Noir, which is a red wine grape. Now, how did a red wine grape end up in a white wine blend? Very simply, they processed it the way that they would process white wines. So when you make red wine, you keep the skin on the grapes. When you make white wine, you remove the skin from the grapes. And that's how you can get a lighter color. And indeed, how they do get a lighter color. In addition to the grapes actually having a lighter colored skin, they take the skins off the white wine grapes before they make them. If they don't take the skins off the white wine grapes, what they're making is what we call an orange wine, which is where you take white wine grapes and then process them the way that you would to make a red wine. It's kind of the opposite of a rosé. A rosé is where you take red wine grapes and then process them in the way that you would make a white wine. So that's kind of a lot of wines that we're not actually talking about. So at any rate, let's get back to the subject at hand. Here we got this white blend, and it has Grenache, Pinot Noir, Gewürztraminer, Viognier, and Sauvignon Blanc. And then it gives us the percentages. So the biggest percentage here, it's 53% Grenache, which is a really awesome, mild, mellow grape. Like I mentioned in talking about Côte de Rhône, Grenache is the main grape in that red blend from France. In this one, it's a Grenache Blanc. We also have Pinot Noir. So those are going to, at 18% of this, so that's going to be giving this most of its body and most of its substance. The Gewürztraminer and the Viognier are going to give this more of a stone fruit element. Viognier very classically has a lot of peach and melon flavors. Gewürztraminer and Sauvignon Blanc typically have a great deal of minerality to them. And so those are going to level out those fruity notes to make this wine, I suspect, again, we haven't tasted it yet, but I suspect this is going to be a pretty demure, medium-bodied, off-dry white, is what I would suspect based off the information that I have here available to me. Like our last bottle, this guy's a screw top, so it's going to taste exactly how it did when they bottled it back in 2019. It's 13% ABV, and it says it's deeply nuanced, and jasmine blossom, that's going to be coming from the Viognier. Melon, like I said, peach from the Gewürztraminer, peach from the Viognier, and minerality coming from the Sauv Blanc. So yeah, should be pretty fun. Should be a really delightful wine. I'm looking forward to enjoying this. So here's our third wine, and this one exemplifies a little bit of wine wisdom that I picked up back when I was managing a wine store. So this is a Greek wine. The varietal is Rhoditis, and I'm probably mispronouncing that because I don't speak Greek. So here's a little story about why Greek wine is usually a pretty good value. So back when I was managing a wine shop, it was the heart of the financial collapse, 2008 and 2009. And we had a bunch of Greek wines on our shelf, and I was reading up on them to familiarize myself with the products. And Greece had spent a truckload of money, like the Greek government spent a bunch of money to try and get Greek wines to export market here in America. And unfortunately, the financial crisis hit domestically here in the US, and also a giant financial crisis hit in Greece around the same time. So that money kind of didn't pan out so well in their investment. But the reason why they were investing money, the Greek government was interested in trying to beef up its wine sales, was because there's not a lot of inroads for the American consumer to familiarize themselves with Greek wine varietals. First off, there's a bunch of different Greek wine varietals, like literally hundreds of different white and red wines that are native to Greece. Secondly, those wine varietals are named appropriately in Greek, and Greek is famously very hard to speak. It uses a different alphabet, and some of those Greek wine varietals start with like the letter X, which can be very scary to Americans. I don't know why. I think the fun of the world of wine is finding new things, and especially at a great price. Like this is our most expensive bottle at $10.99. All right. So when we look at this bottle, there's not a lot of data on here. It just tells me that it is a Rhoditis. It's going to be a dry white wine, and it's from a producer called Kouros. We can see that it has a cork top. So this wine, when it was in the shop, was stored upright, which is not a good sign. If you're storing wine for a long while, you want it to be on its side so that the cork remains wet. That will still allow the oxygen interface through the cork, whether that cork is natural or synthetic. So that's an important part of keeping your wine, like if you're cellaring it. That's a whole nother story. I like drinking wine. I don't like cellaring my wine. I don't make that kind of money. But at any rate, we got a Rhoditis over here. I'm sure that this is going to be tasty. Basically, there are so many varietals of Greek wine that it's really hard to know them all. In fact, I could only name a handful of them if I tried really, really hard. But there are only two that you need to remember, and they are the two that you ought to avoid if you don't like very specific flavors. In the world of Greek wines, there's a really, really affordable wines, and they're an acquired taste for the country people of Greece. And the first one is called Retsina. And Retsina is a white wine that famously is aged in pine barrels. So it acquires a very pine pitch taste. So if you don't like the taste of evergreen, do not buy Retsina. The second one is Ouzo, which is the most famous of the Greek wines. And that one has a very prominent licorice flavor, which for a lot of folks is very controversial. Ouzo and Retsina are always the cheapest Greek wines, and they're oftentimes the only Greek wines that you'll see at the store. But if you see any other Greek wine that is not Ouzo or Retsina, bet your money on it. It's going to be a good bet. This was a $10.99 investment. I'm making some delicious seafood soup tonight. This is going to go really good in that, and it's going to taste really good with it. So yeah, I'll find out together. Sherry and I are going to enjoy it, and this is the one we're going to taste on screen. We're not going to drink 6 bottles of wine tonight, hopefully. But yeah, there we go. Kouros Patra Rhoditis. All right, so our first red that we're going to talk about is this beautiful wine from Piemonte. It is Briccotondo Barbera de Piemonte. So I picked this wine because I love Italian wines, and normally my favorite Italian wines are like Nero d'Avola. It's usually like $9, really great, beautiful Sicilian red, light-bodied to medium-bodied, very fruit-forward, but also dry. So this one, because it's from Piemonte, is in northern Italy, and the grapes there that are most preeminent tend to be Nebbiolo grapes. Some of the best wines from Italy, that's at least some of the most well-known and best accorded wines in Italy, are from Piemonte, namely the Barolo, which is considered to be the king of the Italian red wines. Barbera is right down the road from where they make the Barolo in Piemonte. So this wine is going to be made from grapes that are basically in a similar climate, and also are probably some of the same grapes are going to be tossed into this. This does not say whether it's a blend. It does not tell me whether it is a single varietal. I don't have any data as to the grapes in here other than that it is a Barbera. Sometimes you'll have wines that are Barbera de Asti. Sometimes you'll have Barbaresco. All those wines are from that region. And real honestly, I've never had a bad one from Piemonte. So I figured this thing's probably going to be surefire. It is in a screw top, so that means that there hasn't been any aging. And that DOC label right there, right on the back, tells me that the Italian government has tested and said, yeah, this is true Piemonte Barbera wine. Offhand, I'm going to guess that at its price point, this guy's probably going to be more medium-bodied, or probably not light-bodied, because the grapes and the wines that come from that region tend not to be very light-bodied. But, you know, I'm ready to be surprised. Can't really tell anything from the color of the bottle. It's a little dark bottle, so I don't really see. Sometimes you can tell the body of the wine based off how it lies in the bottle when you roll it around. I'm not seeing anything like that's going to indicate the relative viscosity or body of the wine, but you know what? It's going to be great. It's red wine from Italy. You rarely can go wrong. So Italian reds, usually a good bet, and I think this is going to be no exception to that rule. So our second red wine is going to be this Rawson's Retreat Shiraz Cabernet. So what is Shiraz? Shiraz is what they call the Syrah grape when they grow it in Australia and South Africa. I don't actually know the reason why they chose a different name for that grape varietal in those regions, but that's what they call it. If you see the term Shiraz, that means them grapes is coming from Australia or they're coming from South Africa. So that's the first thing out the gate. Now, Syrah grapes tend to have a relatively high amount of tannins in them, so they tend to make for a very dry wine. The expression of Syrah in Australia as Shiraz tends to have a very overwhelming cherry note to it. So I'm 100% certain that this wine is going to have a big cherry flavor. And I'm positive that it's also going to be pretty dry because it's got Cabernet and Shiraz. Both of those are drier grape varietals. Now, it's from Australia, relatively hot country, high heat. So this probably has a relatively high ABV, and we'll check the back and take a look-see. And right there, 13.5. So yeah, actually a little bit less than I thought. I was suspecting this would be around 15%. Cabernet is possibly the most popular grape varietal in America and globally. Everybody likes Cab Sav. It makes these big, bold, juicy, rich wines. Cab Sav from Australia, or Cabernet Sauvignon from California is kind of what put California winemaking on the map. The Chardonnay and the Cab Sav back in the 1960s. So since then, it's still been the most popular varietal in America. Pinot Noir has made a huge amount of headway, but Cabs are classically big, full-bodied red wines. They're big and juicy and bright. It's one of the Cabernet and Syrah are both varietals that are found in the classic Bordeaux blend, which is France's most famous red wine. So here we have an Australian varietal. Australians, now their wines are usually really affordable because they grow a great deal of wine. They get a really great climate that's conducive to viticulture. And as a result, you can usually find pretty good wine at a pretty good price point. Some of my favorite vineyards are like Penfolds, I really like. If you want to go more expensive, De Ehrenberg is most excellent. I'm not familiar with Rawson's Retreat, and to be quite honest, I thought that this was Penfolds, and I only now realize that it is not. But you know what? I'm pretty sure that this is going to be an awesome bottle of wine. And probably going to have this with some red meat, because that's what's best with red wine. All right, so for our last red at under $10, we've got a beautiful Malbec. Now, Malbec has been a really popular wine in part because of the story behind Malbec. So, what is a Malbec? For a very long time, everybody thought that Malbec was like this secret, hidden grape varietal that went extinct in France, but it lived on in Argentina. And that story, it has some truth to it. So what happened is in the 1800s, there was a woodlouse outbreak in France called phylloxera. The phylloxera outbreak devastated native French vineyards. In fact, there's several varietals of grapes that went extinct in France, and that they are no more. Like, you can't make cognac the same way that they made cognac. They had to change the grapes because the grapes they used to make the cognac with in the 1800s are gone. There's a huge amount of fallout from the phylloxera outbreak. One of the good pieces of fallout was that horticulturalists found that Vitis lambrusco rootstock from American grape varietals that were native to America could be grafted onto the grape varietals in France and save those grapes from being lost to the woodlouse. And that's exactly what they did. So Malbec was a grape varietal that was present in France. And most of it did die out. And they didn't replant a lot of it because it was always viewed as a somewhat suboptimal grape varietal in France. It was usually mostly used to buff out red blends. And that's not to say that the grape itself is bad. It's just that in France, Malbec grapes weren't as expressive as some of the other grapes that they grow in France, like Cabernet Franc or Cabernet Sauvignon or Syrah or Petit Verdot. All of those red wine varietals have a much more expressive flavor in their native France. So the French didn't plant a lot of Malbec back after their vineyards got destroyed by this woodlouse outbreak. Now, there certainly is French Malbec, and a lot of it's really delicious. But the French Malbec drink's a bit different than the Argentinian Malbec. And it makes a lot of sense. France is a northern climate, a lot colder, not a tropical, subtropical climate, and a much lower altitude than where most of these vineyards are in Argentina. And so what happened was the people that settled in Argentina had these grapes that they brought over with them from France, planted them, and started making wine. And for a long time, they thought that the grapes were just Merlot, because the Malbec grapes, like the plant itself, looks exactly like Merlot grapes. The leaves look very similar. The only real difference is that you can harvest them a little bit later. And so some people noticed that, and they finally, when the technology became available in the 80s, they DNA tested them and found out, hey, wait a minute, this isn't Merlot, this is Malbec. And Argentina had a gas of a time marketing it as a long-lost grape varietal, and that's why you got to get it. So that's why it's a hot seller, even now. Malbec's been on the scene in the kind of the limelight of American wines or in the American wine market, I should say, for a great while, upwards of like 15 years, and its popularity has not slowed at all. So that's your basic story behind Malbec. Now, why did I choose this Malbec? It was the last one on the shelf, and that's usually a good sign that that wine was pretty decent. It was only $9, which is awesome. This wine is from the 2016 vintage, and a hot tip when you're drinking a medium-bodied or full-bodied red wine, or even a lighter-bodied red wine, although it's slightly less important on the lighter-bodied red wines, but if you want a full-bodied red wine, if this sucker has been in the bottle for 5 years or more, up to 10 years is usually when they drink at their best, the oxidation that happens through the cork actually softens the wine inside and allows it to reach its full potential. So that's why people age wine in cellars, is to allow them to soften and become better tasting. You can achieve the same thing if you swirl your wine when you have it by the glass. So like, let's say I pop open one of these reds and it's not really suiting my palate very much. If you swirl that glass for 90 seconds, which is a hell of a long time, it will actually release more of the flavor, and it's measurable because those compounds, the aromatics that actually build up the flavor, will come out of the wine as it's swirled around. And scientists have done studies and found that the optimal amount of aromatics are released from a glass of red wine after 90 seconds of swirling. Try it yourself. Pour the first sip, actually pour 2 glasses, swirl one for 90 seconds, don't swirl the other one, and taste them. And you may find that the wine opens up, which is to say it becomes a lot more round on the palate and on the mouth. It becomes oftentimes a lot softer and a lot easier to drink. So all that happens when you swirl that wine, or if you're a savvy shopper and you notice that the red varietal is 5 or more years old or older, then you probably are going to have a better showing than a younger red wine. Most red wines taste best after about 5 years. There's a couple of exceptions, of course. The world of wine is a vastly ever-expanding universe. But I suspect that this is going to be possibly the best out of these 3 reds that we picked. And I'm going to be very excited to have this, possibly with some lamb. Hey, we're here. We're going to try this Greek wine that we got at the shop. There you go, Sherry. Taste it out. Let me know what you think.
Wow. I can't believe this was only $10.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So it's pretty easy to find affordable wine if you know a little bit about what you're doing. And if there's anything more that you guys want to learn about wine, I love talking about wine and other beverages. This video was in part given to us by one of our subscribers. He's like, hey, how can I find $10 wine? So if you got any videos or advice or anything you want to see or learn more about, why don't you hit us up with a like, a subscribe, or a comment, and we'll do our best. So thanks again for joining us, and y'all have a great day.